Some details of this case are a bit graphic and may not be suitable for all ages. Listener discretion is advised.
It's a decades-old case swirling with questions. Who killed Monika Rizzo?
And why? Rizzo's case takes us back to the 90s. This is South Texas Crime Stories, Episode 2, The Boneyard. On May 5th, 1997, the 44-year-old mother of two left her work with no explanation. After a few days, Rizzo's boss was finally able to reach her at home. She said she wasn't feeling well, but would be back to work on Monday, May 19th. The day came and went. No Rizzo.
Fast forward now to June 5th. An anonymous mail caller told police Monika had been killed by her husband, Leonard, and her bones were in their backyard. San Antonio police rushed to the couple's home and spoke with Leonard and one of the couple's sons who no longer lived there. The son said he hadn't seen his mom in over a week. Meanwhile, Leonard said he had seen her when she got home from work. A few days later, he woke up and she was gone.
Leonard never reported her missing, and SAPD's search of the backyard only turned up animal bones. Exactly 1 month passed, and the anonymous tipster called police again. He said Monika's bones were buried under a pile of tires in the backyard. This time, SAPD's search yielded gruesome results.
A search warrant affidavit described human bones, hair, bodily fluids, all found in the backyard and barbecue pit. A group of archaeologists with the University of Texas excavated the backyard for 8 days. They found more than 200 bone fragments chopped into pieces less than 3 inches long.
Investigators thought the bones had gone through a wood chipper or shredder and had been there for a week or two. At this point, they weren't sure if all of the bones were Monika's or if they belonged to others as well. This find had police focusing their attention on husband Leonard.
He said consistently that he had nothing to do with Monika's disappearance, and how the bones got into his backyard was just as much a mystery to him. A search was done on the Rizzo home, and it was reported that several sections of drywall had been bashed in. Monika's co-workers also spoke with police and told them they had been concerned about her because she started to lose weight, and they noticed bruising on her body. The case at this point was open, but no arrests were made.
2 years later, Leonard was placed under arrest, but it had nothing to do with his late wife. Instead, his current girlfriend told police he threatened to, quote, kill her, chop her up, put her in a garbage bag, and bury her, unquote. SAPD showed up on his doorstep and he greeted them with a gun. This led to a standoff with police. Leonard was shot after pointing a gun at officers. Leonard survived and was later convicted of 4 criminal counts.
In the same year, 1999, the bone fragments were positively identified as Monika Rizzo and only Monika Rizzo. Leonard Rizzo has always been the main suspect in this case, but he was never charged. Monika was buried beside her son, who had died in 1998 from cancer.
It's been 25 years since anyone saw Monika alive. To this day, her death is a mystery.
Okay, so we just heard a rehash of this case, Lee, and so many questions.
This case, honestly, digging into it, blew my mind with the whole timeline of everything, what was found, this anonymous tipster, first of all.
Oh, yeah, so we later found out his name was Robert Hakala, and I hope I'm saying his name right. He was a family friend. I saw a lot of questions in a lot of the Reddit forums, like, who was this guy? Who was this tipster?
Why does he know so much?
Exactly. How did he know so much? And so apparently, he was a family friend that would visit the home often. And he told police he was at the home and saw the dog playing with the human jawbone. So that just, like I can't imagine.
Right. That image in your head, to see a dog then running around with a human jawbone, in its mouth.
Yeah.
That's unmistakable.
Yeah, it's unmistakable. But then I had the question, was he ever a person of interest? Because he seemed to know a lot.
Right.
But police never named him as a person of interest and always just had Leonard Rizzo as the main suspect in this case.
Exactly. And I think that was pretty significant, that even though Robert Calla knew so much, police never had their sights on him. I guess we can talk about that now. That's who police were focused on this entire time. And
were they right to just focus on him though? That was like, could there have been other suspects we just don't know about that they focused on? That this case just always seemed to pinpoint him, which he, from day one, had always denied he had any part of. But then you question him as well because your wife just disappears, you don't report her missing, you know, and all these bones are just in your backyard and you don't know how they got there?
Exactly. It raises a lot of questions, but I mean, as we know, he was never charged with anything. And
no.
I think that's significant too, because it really speaks to the fact that even if police are zoned in on someone,
it doesn't mean you're going to get charged. And he never was.
He never was. And it's just like they have to have enough evidence to present it to the attorney and see if charges will be filed. If they don't have enough and the attorney doesn't think this is a prosecutable person, they're not going to move forward with it.
And it's so hard because you feel like there is enough evidence. And especially 2 years later, when he commits that crime with his latest girlfriend, and he tells her, you know, quote, "I will chop up your body and I will, you know, put it in garbage bags." Like, that doesn't look good for you, Rizzo.
It doesn't look good for you. And then especially if what we know now, Monika's bones chopped up, whether it be a wood chipper or a shredder.
Yeah.
It just it raises more questions from the outside. We're all like, this is so obvious. But it's just not that simple when it comes to police work.
No.
What's obvious to us, we can't just say, oh, well, this makes the most sense.
It's him. You can't say that.
Right. We wish we could, but we can't.
So I want to go back to that excavation. We had some quotes from Dr. Robert Hard, who was a part of that team of archaeologists from the University of Texas. And this was a several days long excavation because the bones were so small. But he said, "We literally crawled across this area using our trowels and moving the roots and moving the grass blades and looking down beneath the grass. And every time we found a bone fragment or something the police department considered might be evidence, we put an orange pin flag out. Before they were done, the yard was dotted with dozens of orange flags." I remember seeing old footage of this. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the archive video from KSAT from when this occurred, but it literally is a yard full of these little orange flags that signified something they had found.
As we know, over 200 bone fragments, most of which were less than 3 inches long. That's a lot to find in a backyard in the barbecue pit. That's a lot to uncover. And I don't know if you want to read this next quote by Dr. Hard, but it was significant what they found and the condition of the bones that they found.
Yeah, he said, when you find bone in an old archaeology site, the bone is very dry. This bone still had a greasy feel to it, so we knew it had not been there very long, but at the same time, it had been there more than a week or a couple of weeks. There was no soft tissue still attached to it, end quote.
I got chills when you read that, by the way. It's just so gruesome to just have that in your backyard.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. And I know Leonard Rizzo has always said nothing as far as that he was a part of this crime. He's kept, tight-lipped about anything. But still, again, how do you not know there's all these bones in your backyard? And it wasn't like they were there for, months or years. It said weeks, maybe a couple of weeks.
Right.
Because of the condition they were in. So they were pretty fresh.
Right. Well, also, you found this old 1998 article from the Victoria Advocate. It was with the AP talking about, he might have claimed from the beginning he was innocent, but according to police, there was an interview where he tried to make a deal with them. I'm going to read a quote here from one of the detectives on this case. And the quote says, he said, "If we can guarantee him 10 years probation without jail time, that he would tell us everything, unquote.
But Rizzo denied having said this at all, saying detectives were the ones who suggested several possibilities of a light sentences if he would confess to killing his wife. But, so there's a lot of hearsay, and to me, I was like, please don't just put out this quote without there being some actuality to it, right?
What would their motivation be to trying to say that he offered up, I'll do 10 years and tell you everything?
It's such a random amount.
Right.
Just 10 years.
10 years probation. I don't want to go to jail ever. I'll tell you everything that happened, though.
Like, police aren't going to make a deal like that.
Also, like, what motivation would they have for lying about that?
Yeah, or even to say they did. That's not a deal that you're going to get for killing your wife. 10 years probation.
Right.
Like, that's just not going to happen.
That's not feasible.
Another thing I found interesting in this article, he has questioned the DNA results and maintained his belief that his wife is alive.
Again, I have to go and, like, dramatic pause for a reason, because you have to go back. What would be a scientist's motivation for lying about the fact 200 bone fragments came from Monika Rizzo? What motivation do they have to lie and say this is not true?
Now, there was a lot of back and forth with the bones found. At first, they thought it was from multiple people, not just Rizzo, that there were parts from possible up to 4 people, I believe, at the time. And then it would take years. Mm-hmm. It would take 2 years for them to positively identify those bones as Rizzo's and say they were all from her. Right. Not from multiple people like it was first considered in 1997. So like you said, it goes back to you can't deny scientific evidence.
And it's something that we wish we could say, oh, let's go talk to the detective on this case. Let's go talk to the people who originally started handling this case. You also have to put yourself back. It's been decades since this actually happened. So we emailed SAPD and asked, is there any way we can talk to the original detective on this case? Or since it is a cold case, is someone new handling this? And SAPD said the original detective who handled the case, his original notes are no longer available due to how long ago this case was. They also said that original detective is now retired, and the new detectives, they don't have anything new.
So how do you just lose case notes on this? I mean, I know it's a cold case, but that's important case file, I think. Is that a misstep by the SAPD for not having those original notes to pass to a new detective on the case? I feel like that's very important information you can't just lose.
Right, and they didn't really elaborate any further saying, oh, well, they're lost. Well, maybe they're not digitized at this point. Maybe they're somewhere in stacks of old case files and it's just not easily accessible, because I imagine now we're all moving to the digital era and we do a lot of our reporting on our computers, things like that. So maybe it's that kind of a situation, but you would think there would be some kind of better organization for this, because
it's an open case.
It's still an open case, and she still has a living family member, a living son at least, who doesn't have answers of what happened to his mother.
She did have 2 sons. One passed away in 1998 from cancer. So he never really found out if those bones were his mother's or not, because he passed away before that that scientific evidence was revealed and it was concluded to be her. But she does still have 1 son that's alive. He no longer lives here in Texas, though. You were able to find him on Facebook, and you did reach out to him.
I messaged him and just said, sorry for this out of the blue message. Is there any chance you want to talk to us about your mother or what happened in this case? Because it's something we're digging back into on our end. And he respectfully declined. He said he didn't want to talk about his mom or this case, which, I mean, I understand. It's been so long. It's been over 25 years at this point.
And I'm sure he's moved on. And he's trying to move on, and it's not something he wants to rehash. One thing we couldn't really find out was whatever happened to Leonard.
Yeah.
I know after his 2-year prison term for the 1999 incident, we had heard he had possibly moved out of the state to maybe New Mexico. But there's really no record if he has died since or if he's still alive. We just can't find any information on Leonard Rizzo and his whereabouts now.
And it's very probable he could still be alive at this point. I mean, they were in their 40s back in 1997 when this all happened. He'd be in his 60s, early 70s at this point. So It's very possible he's still alive. Now, we did find, it's on a website called Find a Grave. We did find a picture of Monika Rizzo's grave. She's buried next to her son who had died who died in 1998 from cancer. And Leonard Rizzo is on that same tombstone, her late husband, or her husband. So
is it the husband or is it the son? Because the son was named Leonard as well.
There's one side for the son, and there's one side for Monika and Leonard Sr.
So it was like a double for like a married couple.
For a married couple with their son. So
interesting.
It's very interesting. And on that, something else I found interesting looking at this gravestone, Monika Rizzo's date of death is listed as May 28th, 1997. Now, we were trying to imagine how they came up with that date. Maybe it's because of the bone fragments. They said these are a couple weeks old. We can put her approximately at May 28th is when she died.
May not be an exact date, but it's probably a close enough date.
Right, exactly. And so I just thought that was interesting. They had that listed as her date of death on there. And obviously there's a lot of speculation online about this. I mean, we could speculate back and forth all day.
There's a lot of forums, like crime forums, that
exactly
have their own conclusions and
deep dark Reddit threads.
Yes, you go into a rabbit hole.
Seriously,
when you start digging into this. And as true crime fans, we did that, and you start seeing other, like, hey, why isn't the tipster included as a possible suspect? He knew so much, and he knew where to find those bones and where they were at. Like, why is he not more of a suspect?
Another thing on that deep dark Reddit thread was there was a claim that one of her sons, they didn't name who, saw her in the middle of the night, May 27th. That was after her husband had said, I haven't seen her. She's been gone. I cannot find that substantiated anywhere. It was only on this one little thread. So it could be completely false. But then it's also like, what if it's not?
What if it's not?
What if someone did see her the day before she was declared dead? So it just, you can go into like a whole tizzy about all of the different rumors and everything and what family is saying. And speaking of what family is saying, her father wrote a book.
Yeah, and it's actually, I haven't read the book, but it's a very telling book. Her father was named William McKinney, and he released a book about his daughter's murder called The Raw Truth. It can be found on Amazon. We have a link to that on the article for this episode. And looking at the reviews of the book reviews, everybody is saying how well it was written and how unique of a book it was because this case was still open. But you can tell it was from a father grieving.
Right. There was, and I read in his description of what his book was, something that stood out to me was intimate family details. And you have to put yourself in that place of a family.
He knew them better than anybody.
Exactly.
Mind you, maybe not as well as the sons because he wasn't inside the home. This was still his daughter and son-in-law.
Right.
And I believe he always felt that Leonard was the one who killed his daughter.
Exactly. And that's got to be so hard as a father because, like the stereotypical dad role is like wanting to protect your children, no matter how old your children are, in their 40s up above, you want to be able to protect them. And so that's got to be a hard book for him to have written and to try and express that grief and what he's feeling in that moment. So you've got to feel for the guy. You've got to feel for the living son that we reached out to. It's got to be hard not having those answers. And that's something we take into account when we're reporting these kinds of stories is you don't want to push too far in asking for response from the family or from detectives. You've got to have that level of sincerity and some tact when approaching this as a journalist too. And another thing I wanted to point out with this case that we mentioned in the original part of this podcast, there were signs of abuse noticed by some of Monika's coworkers. They mentioned she had lost weight and they saw bruises on her body. I just want to throw this out there. There is a national domestic violence hotline. That number is 800-799-7233. If you're not in a place you can talk on the phone, you can text START to 88788. That resource is available if you are a victim or if you see signs of abuse on someone. Just throwing that out there. It's a very helpful resource. There's also an online website, www.thehotline.org. Just a resource for people to have something at their disposal if they notice something like this, because we always talk about how important it is. If you see something, say something.
especially here in Bexar County, who has a very high rate of domestic violence cases. I know in the court systems, I know Courtney Friedman and myself have done numerous stories on domestic violence in Bexar County and what's being done to help. And there is numerous other resources as well here just in Bexar County that we have listed on our website as well. For anybody who needs those numbers, they are there, and there are places that can help you if you need it.
Right, there's options that you can do something. But I think this was a good recap of Monika Rizzo's case. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and make sure to listen in next Tuesday for another episode of South Texas Crime Stories.